It's hard not to sense a wave of frustration and impatience sweeping across South Africa right now. For years, citizens have waiting for real change, waiting for answers, waiting for leadership that matches the promises made. And then, just when the pressure seems unbearable, President Cyril Ramaphosa steps forward with a televised invitation, asking people to submit their questions. But in a moment that had the potential to open dialogue, many saw only empty gestures, an appeal delivered too late to restore faith. Today, we're unpacking that critical moment. Why did it feel like damage control rather than leadership? What does it say about the state of trust, the urgency of action, and the need for real connection between citizens and government? Let's explore. To understand today's skepticism, we need to go back in time. Ramaphosa came into power amid high hopes. He cast himself as the leader who would usher in a new dawn, restoring trust after the storm of corruption and state capture that marred Jacob Zuma's presidency. He promised transformation, renewal, and healing. Institutions were meant to be rebuilt. Public confidence was meant to be regained. Yet, even as the rhetoric of reform took shape, many South Africans felt let down. Power shortages continued. Service delivery remained uneven. Reform and recovery were talked about often but felt too slow, too distant. Over time, frustration fermented. Unemployment stayed high, economic inequality persisted. By the time the government televised that invitation, calling citizens to submit questions, it felt like a short apology, a belated attempt at dialogue from someone who had already lost credibility. That sense of disillusionment was captured precisely. Political analyst Diverging said, "Asking questions is important, but when it happens after years of unfulfilled promises and growing discontent, it feels more like damage control than genuine leadership." That perception of outreach arriving too late, of a dialogue that did not match the urgency of the moment, echoed widely across public opinion. Let's step back and examine what triggered this moment of outreach in the first place. It wasn't born from calm. South Africa has been navigating multiple crises. The National Dialogue, launched earlier this month in mid-August with a two-day convention in Pretoria, sought to bring together political leaders, civil society, and citizens to tackle poverty, unemployment, corruption, crime, and inequality. It was billed as a soul-searching exercise, a reset. Yet cost concerns, some estimates approaching $40 million, and skepticism about its real impact colored perceptions. At home, discontent brewed within the governing coalition amid international tensions. U.S. tariffs on South African goods, imposed starting August 1st, threatened hundreds of thousands of jobs. The denial of a U.S. visa for Ramaphosa's trade envoy, Mcebisai Jonas, deepened domestic discord, exposing cracks within the coalition. The Democratic Alliance, junior partner in government, openly criticized government handling and even made its own diplomatic overtures to Washington. Meanwhile, tensions with the U.S. continued. The South African government condemned a U.S. human rights report as inaccurate and deeply flawed, particularly pushing back against claims of discrimination against white Afrikaners following land reform. That statement underlined the government's sensitivity to narratives it views as misleading and overly politicized. Given this backdrop, national stagnation, economic stress, coalition strain, and increasingly hostile international dynamics, the president's late invitation felt reactive, not proactive. To understand the broader picture, let's revisit why trust has frayed. South Africa's democratic journey today is weighed down by a history of betrayal. The corruption under Zuma, repeatedly referred to as state capture, severely eroded institutional integrity. Ramaphosa was supposed to be the antidote. But the lingering frustration reflects how deeply structural problems and public skepticism have taken root. So, what are the multiple viewpoints at play here? Supporters of the outreach may argue that any attempt at opening channels of communication, even belated, is better than none. People want their leadership to speak, to listen, even imperfectly. The National Dialogue, for example, echoes a past moment of unity, echoing the multi-party negotiations of the early 1990s, and may be seen as an opportunity, even if flawed, for society to regain its footing. Critics, however, see a pattern. symbolic gestures in place of systemic fixes. A late TV address without follow-up actions, dialogue sessions without accountability, appeals for questions without a roadmap for answers. It's that gap between words and deeds that erodes faith. There's also the international lens. South Africa's response to tariffs, diplomatic friction, and human rights criticism has been defensive. That posture, while expected, also underscores a sense of isolation, caught between domestic pressures and global scrutiny, without a clear, strategic response. If all of this feels like a tangled mess, that's because it is. The deeper issue is trust. Citizens want to know what happens after questions are asked. Will there be policy changes? Will deadlines be honored? Will unemployment drop? Will presidents remain visible until real outcomes materialize? Looking ahead, the road is hard but not hopeless. For outreach to yield trust, it must be followed by concrete action. The national dialogue must produce more than talking points. It needs timelines, measurable goals, and inclusive accountability. The president must show up publicly, not just for ceremonial addresses, but for progress updates that reflect how public input is shaping decision-making. Internationally, the government will need agile diplomacy, navigating U.S. tariffs, rebuilding trust, and attracting investment. But it must do so transparently, showing citizens how partnerships abroad translate into jobs and better lives at home. Domestically, the governing coalition needs cohesion. Quarrels over trade envoys, land reform, and equity risk distracting from urgent priorities. They must be managed internally so that governance remains effective. Ultimately, real leadership is measured not by how well you ask for questions amid a storm, but by how carefully and courageously you answer them afterward. That is the moment that builds or rebuilds trust. So, as South Africans or as invested global observers, what could happen next? Imagine a follow-up televised forum where questions submitted are answered by experts in real time. Imagine local and provincial dialogues that feed directly into tangible policy shifts. Imagine follow-through timelines made public and progress tracked transparently. These aren't pie-in-the-sky ideals. They're the building blocks of real democratic repair. If this conversation resonates with you, please consider subscribing. Your insights, your questions, and your critical voices make spaces like this stronger. Thanks for listening. Until next time, take care and stay engaged.